Who remembers sitting in a classroom, getting picked on by the teacher to read something out loud, and immediately your mouth goes dry, your hands start shaking, you feel that sick feeling in your stomach as all the attention in the room just gets directed, pointed like laser beams from everybody's eyeballs into the sides of your head, and you're there looking at the text, and as you're looking at it, it's like the words are moving around and getting all blurry, and you're trying to say it out loud, and you're just stumbling over letters, and you're making all these mistakes, and then it gets to the end, and the teacher says, "Nice one," moves on to the next person, or they berate you for doing it wrong, and then you are just left there thinking, "What did I even just read aloud?" It's like somebody just hit skip on my life for a second, and we just shtump. Yet at the time, it felt like it was dragging out for days and weeks and months of this torture. Anybody ever had that? Just me? Oh, okay. Well, what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to read text and how to learn to speak better when we're reading text. There are three chief ways to practice: warm-ups, vocal warm-ups; text, which is where you're working on how to say things; and then improv, which is where you're focusing on how you're coming up with what you're saying. This is text. So when we're looking at how we're saying things, I would divide it into three specific areas. Emphasis, that's what parts of the sentence do you emphasize, and in what way do you emphasize them to communicate something or not communicate something. Modulation, those are the types of emphasis that we'll do. We'll use volume, speed, pause, pitch, melody, rhythm, musicality, all of that. It's modulation, how your voice is modulating, how it's varying and moving up and down. This is how, through modulation, we retain the audience's attention and we make the performance engaging for them to listen to, and we amplify, emphasize all the parts of the thought, the qualities and the different meanings and semantics that we actually want the audience to receive. So emphasis, modulation, and connection to what we're saying. And most of the time when you were in that classroom and you were just asked to read something out loud, you were probably just doing the first layer, the first level, which you kind of can't really avoid doing it when you first read unless you're quite good at this and you get a bit of practice, which is the sound. Trying to get it in your mouth, the sound. Then the next layer would be the thought. Can you follow the thought of what it is you're saying? That is, by the time you reach the end of a sentence, you know you can paraphrase back what it is you've just said. You can put it in a new sentence, you can re-articulate that thought because you have the thought. And then the last layer would be intention. How do you read it and actually have an intention behind what you're saying, a certain motivation for saying it, such that if you didn't have the words or the thought and you only had the intention, you would end up saying something similar. What I mean is, if there's a bus coming down the street and somebody's crossing the road, my intention just automatically, this is the thing in improvisation, it goes the opposite way. You get an intention to try to move that person or save that person or make them aware of the bus coming. And it's instantaneous. Then thoughts gather around what that intention is. Our attention is oriented by our intention. So once you have that strong intention, then our attention brings words and sentences and thoughts and things into the mind, and then we can get a sentence and say it out of our mouth. Hey, look out, there's a bus coming, or get off the road, get off the road. If that's a Lord of the Rings reference in there, if you got that. If you got that, amazing. If you didn't get that, you don't need to. So here we have Henry V, Act 3, Scene 1. It's a very famous speech. And why do I want to use Shakespeare? Shakespeare's like advanced English. It's a little harder. And so if you can do that, then normal talking is going to become much easier. doing these things, your emphasis, your modulation, your connection to what you're saying, making sure you have all that aligned when you're talking normally will become easier. And Shakespeare's it's so rich. And really, any text that is just very, very rich will be good to work with. Even if it's just very simple and rich, uh, slightly different, but it can be very rich and very simple, is what I mean. It doesn't need to be complicated as Shakespeare can sometimes be. And I say sometimes, and you might be thinking that's an overstatement. And so if you're somebody who's sitting there thinking, Shakespeare, what's even the point? Why would I try practicing with something harder? I need something simple. No, you don't. You need something inspiring. You need something with depth, with color, with texture, with a lot going on. And you can understand things at a very simple level at first, and then your understanding can penetrate deeper and deeper. And that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go through the process that I would use when I'm going through any text that I get for the first time. First thing I would do is read it. And at this point, I'm just focusing on the sound. I'm not even trying to get the thought yet or the intention behind it. I can start to get a flavor, an idea. So here's what we'll do. We'll go for the first 1, 2, maybe 2 or 3 sentences. They're quite long and they get very complex. And as an actor, Shakespeare is designed for an audience to listen to from an actor. It's not meant to be there for us to just read and compute intellectually. It's designed to be performed, and then while you're watching it, all the words and the meanings and the motivations and all this stuff is, if the actor has a really good grasp of it, it will be communicated so that you don't really need to understand every little minute bit of the thought, but you'll get what that character's talking about and where they're coming from. That's the end goal. So as an actor, we need to go extremely deep into the text. And if you're learning a speech or a presentation or a sales call or a pitch or a script or anything like that, anything where you have a text, do this process to it, and it's just going to get so obscenely good, so much better. And you're going to understand and feel so much more of it, such that it can just roll off the tongue without you having to think about any of it. And everyone around you, even if they don't understand the language and words and thoughts, they'll know exactly what you're meaning somehow. That's the magic of Shakespeare, right? It's so dense when you're looking at it, it doesn't make any sense. But if you're watching an actor who knows what they're doing and they're going through it and they're performing it, you're going to understand exactly where they're coming from. And you're going to know everything you need to know to follow the story. Just like if you're doing a sales script or a pitch, a business pitch or something, you need to know exactly what you're talking about. And even if they don't follow every little thing, and they won't be, they'll be going in their head thinking about something that is triggered by something you've said. They might think about a certain memory or something like that, or, oh yeah, I have that problem there, I need to fix it, whatever. And they miss a little bit of what you were saying. But as long as you know exactly what you're talking about throughout the entire thing, they can tune back in and they'll still be able to follow everything. Let's read it for the sound, just to get it in our mouth. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our English dead. Full stop. I got pretty much every sound. Now I'm going to try to link it all together on a single breath of air. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our English dead. Like that. And I'm going very slow, and we're going at a pace where I can easily get every sound and link it all together. Something about Shakespeare, another great reason to practice with it, is it's like this, it's verse. It's in verse. It's not in prose, like you see on a normal book where all the writing is in these paragraphs. It's in verse, so it has this structure, this metrical structure. And this actually exists in normal English when we speak. In normal English. vanish when we speak. Dee-dum, 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 dee-dum. And so he's written it so it will fit. Everything will fit the rhythm perfectly, and any place where the rhythm deviates, that is telling us something about the state of mind of the character when he's speaking. And we're going to use all this to start to understand ourselves, our own thought processes when we're talking, and really can look at this whole text process as the reverse of the improv process, where we start with the words already there, the thoughts already on the page, and we have to try to get the words, then the thought, then the motivation. So let's follow the thought right now. And to follow the thought, I'm going to follow the punctuation. Punctuation shows where the thought changes direction or where the thought stops. And the stop is the full stop, or an exclamation mark or a question mark. That's where a thought ends. And it's a little bit like a train coming out of a station, and it's going to go on a journey. And every bit of punctuation is switching tracks. And so we start off on an original track. Once more unto the breach, comma. So we switch. Dear friends, comma. We switch over here. Back onto the original track. Once more, semicolon. How do you act a semicolon? That's the question. A semicolon is saying, let me expand on that a little bit more, or something like that. Once more, let me expand on that. Or close the wall up with our English dead, full stop. And that's the whole thought. And the thing to understand is that somehow the beginning of the thought has to make sense with the end of the thought, as in, when I'm about to say the first words of the thought, I already have inside my mind the end of the thought. My attention's already on it, and I'm just speaking it out now until the entire thing is out. Another way of looking at it is like, say, you order something from IKEA, and you get the flat pack furniture come in the little box, and you get it out. And, well, you get out your instructions first. You read the instructions, hopefully, ideally. Maybe you don't. You read the instructions, and you get an idea of what all the pieces are, how they all fit together, and what ultimately we should have by the end of the process of taking all this stuff out and building it. Then when I start speaking, I start getting out the things from inside the box. And there's 4 parts to this sentence. So if you imagine like a footstool, or like a stool with 3 legs, kind of like this one. Like this one here. We've got the flat surface on the top, and we've got the 3 legs on the bottom. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our English dead. And that's the whole thing. If somebody cut me off part way, once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more. And then somebody interrupted and started talking over me. And they might be like, well, how many times should we keep going back to this thing? You haven't even said how many times we need to keep going back. If it was, we're just supposed to do it over and over again. If you'd have let me finish, if you'd have let me conclude getting every piece of this apparatus out of the box, you would see that it's going to make this shape, which includes the 4th piece. Maybe I bring out the 3 legs, and you're like, where's the flat bit on the top? This is like a tripod. I didn't ask for a tripod. I asked for a stool or a table or something with the flat bit on the top. Let me get that last flat bit out. Or close the wall up with our English dead. Oh, okay, now I get it. So you mean just keep going back until the hole in the wall is blocked with all the dead bodies of us. Okay, that makes sense now. Now I got it. Now I don't need to ask that question. Whenever somebody's interrupting you, they're preventing you from getting the entire thought out. I saw a news story recently where somebody did this, and I thought when they did it, and then the newscaster started taking them to task on what they'd said, and I was thinking, you didn't let them finish. So the first part of the thought, you only got that part, and there was a comma there, and they were about to do the rest of the thought before the full stop, which completely changes the meaning of the sentence. It's like if you have a news headline and you say, I don't want to use known figures, X-leader says there's going to be a terrible war. Oh, there's going to be a terrible war. I need to be afraid. I need to collect water and food. And this, I need to blah, 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 blah. And you start reacting to that, but you didn't finish the sentence. If that was just the first part of the sentence. There's X-politician says there's going to be a terrible war if so-and-so does this. Does that change the meaning of what that person said or not? Of course it does. It totally does. It changes everything. And I saw an interview where the person was speaking and they were going to finish their thought and somebody cut them off there and they totally did a number on that person. They totally manipulated that person and cut them off before they finished their sentence, and then did the straw man thing where they pretend like, you just said this. And it's like, they didn't say that. Oh, so you didn't just say that? Let's wind the tape back. It's like, well, yeah, they said that, but so you did it. You're just cutting off again. You see that? You're not waiting to the end of the thought, because that does change what is meant, what the intention is that person had when they started speaking. They had an intention, thoughts gathered around it, and then they began to articulate it. And as they're getting the bits of furniture out the box, you stopped and started freaking out that they were trying to give you this tripod when you'd asked for a table, but all it was you interrupted them before they got to that last piece that they could pull out. And it was absolutely a table. It was always going to be a table. You just made a mountain out of a molehill and a whole load of drama over nothing. And then I saw from this interview, a few days later, I actually saw that person who got interrupted and the other person misrepresented what they said, they'd actually quoted on their news channel what this person had said, and they actually put a full stop on the end and made it look like that they'd said exactly that. And it independently, like they had an intention, a nasty, evil intention, and then they brought out a thought and they just exposed what a horrible person they are. Because who would come up with a thought like this, with a full stop right there, just totally on its own like that, unless they're totally sick and demented and all the rest of it? It's like you interrupted them because they were going to qualify what they were saying, and you didn't let them finish the thought, and you interrupted, and then they missed it. And this is how quick conversations move on, and how sharp you have to be for every single syllable that you say. Because if somebody cuts you off in the middle of the sentence, you have to hold that point in the conversation, wait until they've finished, and then go back to that point, regardless of whatever they say or wherever they try and steer things, because they're now operating off of a false piece of information, off of a perception that was limited. They didn't get the full set of data that you were trying to give them. And people will often do this. They'll cut you off and they don't realize that they're doing it. And then they build a totally false impression of the communication that you're trying to give. And you have to be able to hold on to that, correct it, and do it in a way that's amicable and warm and all of this. That's like a whole side thing. But anyway, back to the text. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our English dead. Once more. I was saying that, and I wasn't thinking about what I was saying. Now I'm following the thought. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more. You, my friends. We're going to keep going. Or, until the entire wall is just blocked with all our bodies. Then we'll stop. And now we've got the sound, we follow the thought. What's the intention behind such a line? Well, the context will help. So if I give you context, then you can start to understand a little bit about why he might be saying this. Henry V, who's speaking, King Henry. But before I give you the context, could you guess, just from what's there? You could probably guess, right? He wants you to keep attacking until the wall's totally blocked. So even if there's a lot of sacrifice, it's going to be worth it. And that's telling us something else about the stakes, about what's at stake, that it's worth closing up the wall with our English dead. It's worth losing that amount of people to try to get the fortress, to try and get through the wall, to take the wall. So that's telling us something about the intention, that it's a very intense, very, very strong intention. And the stakes are very, very high. They're worth more than the number of lives it would take to close up that wall, which would be dozens, 50s, scores, maybe 100 people, something like that. Which is quite a lot in one spot on the battlefield, and there's a whole battle going on here. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our English dead. Tapping into the intention a little bit there. So a bit more context. People are actually fleeing the battlefield. The men are retreating back. And he's saying once more, we've already been there. Let's go back again and again until we can't go back anymore. We just have to stick at this until we take it, or it's over. The battle, the war. We're not going to be able to get any further into France unless we can take this. So we either take it or it's over right now. And we all have to start the long hike back to our boats, get in our ships and go home, and have no plunder or anything to make up for it. So the stakes are extremely high. Next sentence. This is a fairly simple sentence, that one. And here comes the biggie. Here comes the mammoth, okay? Let's try and see if you can follow the thought and try to find the intention inside and how it's moving as we go. In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger. Stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood. Disguise fair nature with hard-favoured rage. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a galled rock o'erhang and jutty his confounded base. He probably lost me there, and if not before, and I could feel it because I can just feel that I'm not following mentally what I'm saying. So if I'm not following it, how can you be following? Unless hopefully I got the words on the screen here and you could be reading it and maybe you're getting it better than I am. And you probably are because my mouth is moving, so my attention's split. Like the brass cannon, the confounded bass, swilled with the wild and wasteful ocean, full stop. And there were several points as I went through where they might sound like independent sentences on their own, but they're not. And there's a crucial difference between breaking this all up into full stops and having them all in one go. And the difference is that when I start saying in peace, I already have in my mind the thought form that encompasses all these other clauses, all these other strands of the thought. Every clause is like a thread, and the sentence is like a rope that's being weaved by all these threads until we have the single structure, whole thought. So somehow in peace has to link all the way to wild and wasteful ocean. In peace, you stay calm, but in war, you have to be like the wild and wasteful ocean. In fact, it's like, take all that and go into the smallest paraphrase. And then here comes the poetry in the verse and the images and stuff that as an audience we get to sit there and see all these amazing things happening if the actor sticks on their intention all the way through and they follow the thought of everything they're saying and they're articulating it in that way where all the tone and the modulation and the emphasis fits that. If you have the right intention, the thoughts and the delivery will be right. They'll be good. It'll be a good delivery such that all of that detail and stuff, we get it easily. The volume variation, the speed variation, which words I'm emphasizing, which words I'm not emphasizing, all of that gets figured out, sort of auto-corrected if I have the right intention. But we need to work our way backwards, so we get it in our mouth first. So I'm going to try to get every sound, and I'm going to try to link it all together on a single breath as I go from clause to clause. And when I hit the punctuation, that's where the thought is suspended. It's still moving, it hasn't landed, which it will do with the full stop. I'm going to try to do it with the sound and the thought as I go. And I like to do this movement like this to feel where it, because it's all one smooth stroke up until the punctuation. And then it's another smooth stroke all the way through that. One thread into another thread. In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. In peace, if you see a man who's very peaceful and just still and humble, not really being very aggressive or moving around loads and hectically, but it's a guy who's still and humble, thinks a little of himself, just keeps his head down, not like a slave, like not like slavishly or whatever, but like he is humble. He has humility. He's not going to take up too much space. In peace, nothing so becomes a man. Like nothing's as good as a guy being, still and humble. That's how we should be in peace, is what he's saying. In peace. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, so in peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of it, and this is the contrast, we've got one thread that's like this. In peace, just chill out, just be calm and humble and all the rest of it. But in war, and he's not saying in war, he's saying, but when the blast of war blows in our ears, I'm just seeing one of those slow-mo images of like an explosion in a movie, and all this shrapnel coming this way, and fire and explosions. When that's happening, then imitate the action of the tiger. Then do like the tiger does. Stiffen the sinews. If you ever see a tiger when it's like snarling at you, and it's like its muscles get all tight. Summon up the blood. Summon up the blood. You have to summon your strength, your emotion, your motivation. Disguise fair nature with hard favoured rage. So the fair nature of just being in peace and beautiful nature, fair nature, still, just, peaceful, loving, all the rest of it. You might be that on the inside. Even in the midst of this war, you might still feel like, you don't want to be doing this right now. But when the blast of war is blowing in your ears, disguise fair nature with hard-favored rage. Hard-favored. Not fair and amiable and like space and graciousness and softness. Hard-favored rage. Another comparison. Fair nature with hard-favored rage. And we got those two D's, hard-favored and rage, which is an affricative, and your tongue actually goes to the same position as the D for the beginning. J. And notice the stress here, what I said earlier, when the rhythm changes. Disguise fair nature with dee-dum, 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 dee-dum is the natural order. Disguise fair nature with hard-favored rage. Doesn't sound quite right to me. Why would I say with hard-favored? Why wouldn't I stress the hard? Dum, dum, dum. Hard-favored rage. Dum, dum, dee, dum. Hard-favored rage. It's like an extra beat there. And this is where his intention's changing. He's leaning in on that. I can sort of imagine him like grabbing a soldier and being like, "We're gonna pull it together in hard-favored rage. Stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard-favored rage." I'm just going to get water. Always have a little tipple of water on hand. We're still filming, that's good. A little tipple of water on hand just to wet your whiskers. I'm leaning into volume because it feels right. But what if we don't lean into volume? What if you just play this really chill for a second? In peace, there's nothing so becomes it. Let's just think through the reason of it, the logic of it. In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, monosyllabic line. Anywhere there's monosyllables for the entire line, Shakespeare's saying, slow down. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, and we've got this lovely assonance of all these big, chunky vowels. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, and all the emotion, all the tone is going to come out on the vowels. Then the next line is a bit different. Then imitate the action of the tiger. Multi-syllabic words. And we get these T's, this alliteration. Then imitate the action of the tiger. You can feel it in your teeth. Like the tiger's teeth. Stiffen the sinews. Summon up the blood. Just love the variation. Stiffen the sinews. Summon up the blood. Da-da-da. Stiffen the sinews. It's putting the stress the opposite way round. Dum-diddy-dum-dee. Stiffen the sinews. Dum-diddy-dum-dee. Instead of dee-dum-dee-dum. Stiffen the sinews. Doesn't sound right, does it? Stiffen the sinews. There's a quickening. Stiffen the sinews. Summon up the blood. Disguise fair nature with hard-favored rage. Then lend the eye. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect. He's giving us instructions. It's like we're putting it all together. We imitate the action of the tiger. We stiffen the sinews. Imitate the action of the tiger. Semicolon. Let me explain more about that. What you're going to do when you're imitating the action of the tiger is you're going to stiffen the sinews, comma, summon up the blood, comma, disguise fair nature with hard-favoured rage, semicolon. Then lend and there's another part to all of this, imitating the action of the tiger. Those are the first parts, was stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard-favoured rage. Then, once you've done those things, stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, and you've got the hard-favoured rage, then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Terrible aspect. Let pry through the portage of the head. Now here I'd like to look up the word portage, just to keep the video going. I'm not going to do it. Portage, isn't that like in a ship where you've got like the... And my clue is like the brass cannon. Let pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. So, you know, there's like a porthole on a ship, and then it opens up, and there's a cannon there. And you're looking at that cannon's mouth, that big iron ring with that nasty, ominous black hole out of which is going to come death and destruction. That's what your eye should look like, is what he's saying. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect, semicolon, like this. Let pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. It's like your eyes are popping out of your head like cannons about to fire. Let the brow overwhelm it as fearfully. Let the brow overwhelm it, the eye, overwhelm your eyes, as fearfully as doth a golded rock o'erhang and jut. A golded rock, a kind of angry rock. It's really mad rock. It's gold. And there's a thing in Shakespeare where we add if it's written ed, gold, then we do the syllable like that, gold, instead of gold. And then the rhythm works perfectly. As fearfully as doth a golded rock. Otherwise, it would be as fearfully as doth a gold rock. Gold rock would have to be double stress. But because we got the ed, otherwise there'd be an apostrophe. It would be apostrophe D. L apostrophe D. As fearfully as doth a golded rock o'erhang and jutty his confounded base. Swilled. So, imagine this rock overhanging and jutting out over the base of the rock down here, swilled with the wild and wasteful ocean. And so down there's the base of this wild and wasteful ocean, this salty brine you see is crashing up against the rocks down there. And this rock up top, a big heavy rock, is leaning over, like erosion, and the cliff is getting worn away until just that little edge of the cliff is hanging over. And the way, imagine you're down there, and you're getting fearful because it's fearfully overhanging. You're like, I'm kind of worried that thing's going to drop on me any second. Ooh, I don't really want to be under here right now. That's how the enemy should feel when they look at you, because your brow is overwhelming. It's jutting out over your eyes, which are popping out like a cannon's mouth. But your brow is like a cliff face rock overhanging, like it's going to crash on top of them at any second. Really specific instructions. And it starts, in peace there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility, colon. I forgot to mention that part. Colon. Which is like the beginning of a list. So he sort of prefaces this list of instructions for how they should be when they next go up to the breach with this colon. With it, in peace we can all be chill and calm and everything. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, when we can hear all these explosions going on and all these cries and screaming and all this carnage going on, now's not the time to be still and peaceful. Now's the time to imitate the action of the tiger. Think of that tiger, that snarling, angry beast, that insanely powerful, terrifying, largest of the big cats. Tiger, ferocious beast. Then imitate the action of the tiger. Stiffen the sinews. Summon up the blood. Disguise fair nature with hard-favored rage. Lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a galled rock o'erhang and jutty his confounded base, swilled with the wild and wasteful ocean. And he's sort of, I can imagine him, demonstrating this. He's not just telling them. In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger. It can be fun to kind of do it that way. Helps you follow the thought. Then imitate the action of the tiger. I'm imagining like a professor teaching this. The diagrams. Stiffen the sinews, flesh and blood, bones and stuff. Summon up the blood. Item 2 on the list. Item 3, disguise fair nature with hard-favored rage. Like that. Okay, nice. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Just lend it. You will take it back later. You lend the eye a terrible. For now, you gotta put all our resources in on this and lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a galled rock. And I need to figure out the breath here because I'm running out of breath. I don't want to breathe after rock because there's no punctuation. You can breathe where there's no punctuation, but ideally, if I look above, the line above, there's a nice semicolon at brass cannon. So I should breathe there, like the brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a galled rock o'erhang and jutty his confounded base, swilled with the wild and wasteful ocean. Boom, thought ends there. Ideally, you breathe at punctuation at the end of a line. If there's no punctuation at the end of a line, look for punctuation in the middle of the line either side. Ideally, when you say galled rock o'er, as fearfully as doth a galled rock o'erhang, and as doth this bottle open up it's meant to be this bottle open. If I take a break there, this bottle open the cap, as fearfully as doth a galled rock. It sounds like a full stop if you pause there. O'erhang and jutty his confounded base. That's the rest of the thread of the thought. And when there's a thread, we want it to be smooth and running all the way to the end. So we're going to have to think a little faster and think about that rock o'erhanging. What's the rock doing? It's o'erhanging. It's hanging over. This is the first 2 sentences. I don't know how long this video is right now, but it's probably quite long. And this is what you need to do. This is the kind of level of depth and detail. You don't have time to do this when you're just talking normally. You need to make time to practice getting all of this depth and bringing it all out so you don't just read it like, in peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger, stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature, and it doesn't make any sense. Do you remember learning Shakespeare in school and it didn't make any sense? Because the teacher's trying to get you to read it like it's normal writing. And even the normal writing, when they try and get you to read it, they're going way too fast and you miss all this stuff. This is why you need to practice reading aloud. And you need to start to look for how, when you're reading aloud, what's the process you're going to use? You're going to get the sound, then the thought, then the intention. You're going to look for the emphasis, the leaning into verbs, and we haven't even talked about that yet. The highlighting those key words, those key ideas, those key qualities that if we didn't include them, the audience wouldn't have access to that whole world that is in that word. It's much deeper than we think it is just by reading it the first time. I can't tell you how often people will read a sentence and they get to the end, and if I just ask them a question about what they just read, they couldn't answer because they're just focusing on not getting the words wrong, and even that you can be tripping up and stumbling over. And it's just the first layer, and it goes much deeper. And we do all this so that when we say the line or we do the speech, we're not thinking about all this stuff. We've done all that in our practice time, and so as we're performing it, these things are coming up, and we're just sort of just touching on them a little bit, but the audience will get all of it. They're going to get it all because your attention, whatever your attention is on, that's what is communicated. If I've gone through and I've loaded up all this detail, then when I'm talking, it's just going to be in my performance, just slightly. You have a look, see. You tell me. Is any of what we've just been going over going to come through a bit more now when I do it this time? Okay. I'm going to try not to overact. I'm just going to try. So let's do this. Let's not think about any of the stuff I've just spoken about. All I'm going to think about is trying to tell these guys here what's about to happen. We're going to go through that castle wall breach. We're going to keep going back to it until it's sealed, until there's no space for us to get through anymore because of all the dead bodies of us that have piled up there. And I know that's not what you want to hear right now. That's what comes to mind. It's like, they're not going to want to hear that. And the thing you need to understand, and there's the intention of why this next thought comes in. I know you're not going to like this. No, sorry, we're not retreating. We're going to go back again and again and again until we close the wall up with our English dead. In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger. Stiffen the sinews. Summon up the blood. Disguise fair nature with hard-favoured rage. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a golled rock o'erhang and jutty his confounded base, swilled with the wild and wasteful ocean. I took a breath at rock. See, this is what happens here. So there's something wrong with the thought and the way I'm getting through that. Like the brass cannon, semicolon. And then this is all one thread. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully. What am I saying? Intention. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a golled rock o'erhang and jutty his confounded base. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a golled rock o'erhang and jutty his confounded base. I'm searching for the intention and where I'm getting the thought wrong and where my attention is wrong. And I can feel I'm not landing on it yet. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a gold rock o'erhang and jutty. Okay, it's like an amplification. Let pride through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. Oh, sorry. The first one is, and it's getting bigger each time. So now it's making sense to me. Now I'm connecting my intention to my thought, and then that's going to come out through my voice like this. Level 1, okay? So disguise fair nature with hard favored rage. Now you've done that. You've stiffened the sinews. You've summoned up the blood. You've disguised fair nature with hard favored rage. Yep, we all got that. Good. Next. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Do you know what I mean by that? Let me tell you. What I mean is, let it pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. Are you getting that? Kind of. He's got it. Tim's got it. George, show us you're prying through the body. Yeah, he's got it. Alan, oh, you don't get it. No, it's not. It needs to be like as fearfully as doth a galled. You need to let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a galled rock o'erhang and jutty his confounded base. You know, you've got to be like that rock leaning over the wild and wasteful ocean. You ever seen that? You ever been to the coast? We've all been to the coast with our lady friends, and there, whilst frolicking on the beach, we've all seen a big cliff here with a big old rock hanging over, and we think, wow, I'd hate to be underneath that when that drops, right? That's what Alan. Do you know what I mean? Like the golden rock. Oh wait, Alan's getting it now. He's getting it now. Let's go through that again, right? 369, the amplification. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let pride through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a gold rock o'erhang and jutty his confounded base. Just a little fast. But that's it. You know, you gotta lend the eye a terrible aspect. You have to let it pry through the portage of the head like a brass cannon. You know, like even more, let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a gold rock o'erhang and jutty his confounded base, swilled with the wild and wasteful ocean. He goes into lathering mode. Like some people just aren't getting it. I'm looking around, I'm telling them this, and they just, I'm trying to get. It's like, no, more. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a gold rock o'erhang and jutty his confounded base, swilled with the wild and wasteful ocean. That's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of look. And now we should all be getting it. Next. Now set the teeth and stretch the nostril wide. Hold hard the breath. And bend up every spirit to his full height, full stop. On! On, you noblest English! Whose blood is fet from fathers of war-proof. Fathers that, like so many Alexanders, have in these parts from morn till even fought and sheathed their swords for lack of argument. I'm going to stop because that's enough yelling for one day for my neighbours. But in the process of all that, I'm starting to access the intention and the context and the real source behind the words, where it's coming, how you would actually come out with all this, just on the spot, on the fly, or something like this. If it wasn't in perfect verse, it would be something else, but it would be to this effect. We'll leave it there. That's 2 sentences. That's how I'd go through it. And hopefully that gave you some ideas for experimenting with your own practice. My voice is all hoarse now. So what I'll probably do now is just do a little bit of some silent breath and maybe some just to relax my vocal folds and bring myself back down. Hope you enjoyed that. And yeah, stick around. Come back for some more I'll probably do some more of this. I'm trying to learn this speech right now, so I'm going to learn this off by heart, and at some point I'll do a full delivery of it. But hopefully that gives you an idea of how you might practice with text and work on how you're saying things, and yeah, just give you some ideas for that. Thanks for watching.